Hello everyone, welcome to a very special episode of techLGTM with myself Shashank and my co-hosts Amol and Preet. Today we have an amazing personality as our guest. He is an expert on China technology space. He has authored multiple books and he is one of the most sought after speakers on anything related to Chinese technology.
Hello everyone, my name is Amol and I've been following Matt Brennan on Twitter for almost 2 years now. And I follow him on the Twitter for the insights of the China technology space. Recently, I read an amazing book, Attention Factory, written by him. Before reading this book, I thought I knew everything about the TikTok and the ByteDance space and the China space. But after reading his book, I realized that I only know 10% of that space. So super helpful book. Super excited to actually have him on the podcast.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you guys. Yeah.
So, hey, Matt, amazing to have you on this podcast. Love the book, by the way. But to be honest, yeah, Amol was the one who introduced me to your book. And he was very persistent until I read it. And that actually kind of opened my eyes for sure. Like your perspective and the different things that you talk about in the book. More of that to come, but definitely an amazing job. And anything that I would be saying would be just echoing Shashank and Amol's introduction about you. So why don't you tell us a few things about what's going on? How's your journey been? Just about, let's start with just your background.
Yeah, sure. My background. Okay.
Yeah.
Originally I'm from London. I'm British. I went to China 16 years ago now, straight out of university, and sort of stayed to. I was only going to go for 1 year at the beginning, and then, of course, 16 years later, I'm still there. But I originally came just to teach English, and then I stayed to learn Chinese, and then I stayed to do some entrepreneurial ventures with some friends, and we franchised an education chain and set up some schools, some education centers in places like Inner Mongolia and Sichuan province out in the west where
Nice.
the earthquake was around that time. And then later on, that education company invited me into their head office to head up their, firstly their brand, but then later I specialized in educational, what we would now call EdTech, but back then we called it e-learning. So we didn't call it EdTech, we called it e-learning. And so it was very early for this stuff in China. You know, this is before like VIP Kid and all that stuff. Like, this is very difficult to sell digital learning products to Chinese parents back in the day. But we did it, we pioneered it anyway. And so I did that for about 6 years. And then when WeChat basically broke out in China in 2015, with WeChat Pay especially, I could see this was completely revolutionizing China, and I was really blown away by the experience of using WeChat Pay and how everyone was paying with their phones suddenly, and it was just this sweeping change. Official accounts were becoming hot. People were using WeChat for marketing, and so we jumped into that area. I set up my own company, and that's still running today. That's China Channel, which is based in Shanghai, and we do several things, but a lot of people know us from our annual conference, which was quite successful, that we do every year to bring together the ecosystem of digital marketers, brands, agencies, and Tencent comes along as well. And we all sort of like once a year get together for 2 days. That's been a really fantastic experience doing that for so many years.
Awesome.
And then when TikTok broke out, when Douyin broke out, I started using the products there, and because I was covering Tencent so much, as Emma said, like on Twitter, on LinkedIn, I've been putting out content for years. People know me for consistently talking about Tencent, but I found that ByteDance was becoming the most important competitor with Tencent. So I had to know about ByteDance, and I got into ByteDance. I had several friends working at ByteDance, and I could see this. I really believed in Douyin as a product, and I just got into it from there. And that's where the book comes from, just from researching them more and more, and then just realizing there's a fantastic company and a fantastic story here. When I started writing the book, is in January. And to be honest, like I was very confident about TikTok, and TikTok was big, but it you know, the uptick in interest in TikTok globally in that time was just unbelievable. I didn't expect anything to happen in India. I didn't expect anything to happen with Trump, and all of this stuff broke out, and TikTok just became this global. Of course, the virus happened, COVID-19, and that sort of kept everyone indoors, and that really helped TikTok as well with growing their user numbers. So all of this, you know, in the 9 months, everything changed completely, and I found that by the end of it, I'm sort of like TikTok is this global hit. Yeah,
exactly.
But it wasn't obvious that it was going to be like that. You know, even a year ago, I think it was still doing good, but you know, a lot of people weren't entirely confident in it, to be honest.
Do you have a handle on Dorian? Are you making some of those viral videos, Matt?
No, to be honest, I would. Do you know what? Like, I need to get back to the UK. Since COVID, I haven't had a chance to go back. But I don't know if you guys know, but like, there's a region lock on TikTok, right?
Yeah.
So if you're not using a UK phone with a UK SIM card, and you're not in that language region pool of UK, US, Canada, etc., then you start creating content in another part of the world in English. It's going to be really tough for you to actually grow that account doing what I would be doing, which should be like a sort of short video version of what I do on other platforms. I think there is a place for that. I think it's ready for that kind of content for sure. It's gone far beyond just comedy and lip sync and you know, even like the demographics on the platform have changed very considerably, right? So I think there's enough people on there where you can grow an account talking about that and covering it. And on Douyin, we see that there are case studies. So I am interested in doing it, but what's holding me back is I need to get back to the UK and grow the account there for a bit, and then take it away. And then on on Douyin in China, there's tons of foreigners doing that, growing. You know, it's what was interesting about Douyin in the early days in 2018 when it really broke out in China was that it was the first Chinese platform that Western, non-Chinese, not just Western, it could be Russian, could be Asian, whatever, non-Chinese people fully embraced it and were very successful on it. And that didn't happen with Weibo, that didn't happen with WeChat, it didn't happen with all these other platforms, smaller platforms that came about. So from that was a really strong indicator that this would be a global hit. Yeah.
Got it. What was your association with ByteDance or TikTok though? Was there
I've got no official association with them. I know people who work there. I've got a couple of really good friends who work there, who worked early on TikTok. But having said that, the reception from ByteDance about the book from staff has been really good. I've had some very high-level people reach out and say very nice things about the book, and so I was quite surprised that it got up to the high levels of the company. And then also from the frontline staff, many of them really like it. Some of them asked me for signed copies, and
nice.
There's a group that bought 10 copies the other day reached out to me. So and they're going to give it out as prizes or something for their team. So that's really encouraging, because I think like obviously they're hiring a lot of people around the world, right? Like, and most of those people are completely unaware of anything that happened before TikTok. And so this book sort of plugs that gap quite nicely for them. Having said that, it's not the reason why I would never expect ByteDance to promote this book or endorse it is because it's not a PR book, right? It's not, we tell the good part of ByteDance, but we also show the bad part, right? We don't hold back from saying everything's nice and everything's perfect about this company. So a PR team would never be comfortable to embrace that, I feel. But that's the book I wanted to write. I think that's the way. I want to just present the true picture. Really, is what's important to me.
So there are a lot of.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was asking, like, did you expected any kind of backlash when you were writing this book? Like, you were thinking about, like, would it end up in some kind of controversy or book getting banned or anything like that?
It's possible because ByteDance has sued people before for saying things about them that are true, but no, they don't want people to know, or they say it's not. I don't know. Like it's happened to a friend of mine actually, who was a couple of years ago, who wrote a piece through a Chinese on. It got translated into Chinese, and the Chinese media organization that put it out, I think they got sued by ByteDance, I think is what happened. Yeah, and they do have a reputation in China for doing that kind of stuff. So there was a small part of me that said, yeah, you do need to be careful of what you write. But, I think that's healthy, because with every book you do need to be, or any piece of content really, you need to be writing stuff. You can't be making accusations. You can't be making stuff up. You can't be like, okay, this guy said something, so I'm just going to write that in the book and not check it. So it forces you to be very rigorous around checking things and being conservative with what you're saying, which is overall probably good.
Makes sense. So I know that you've been looking into the Tencent market and the China market for some time now, right? And then this certainly took off, the TikTok. But beside basically the global fame of the TikTok and the Douyin, what exactly inspired you to write this particular book?
The biggest inspiration was the product itself. Was Douyin and TikTok, definitely. Having been a user of the platforms for several years, and just seeing how compelling it is, and especially 2018, 2019, I was heavily using Douyin. I don't use it as much today, but I use TikTok a bit still, and I think they're just very, very, these are the kinds of products that only happens every like 5 or 10 years. That really, it's a special, breakthrough product that is once, a really, really big game changer. Like WeChat, I think in China you've got so many great companies now coming out of China, internet companies. You've got Meituan, you've got Pinduoduo, you've got Alipay, obviously, it's trying to just kind of almost went IPO. And there's a ton of bunch of others, but the really, really big breakthrough, like, the best of the best products, there's only been 2, and that's WeChat and Douyin in my mind. They're on a level above everything else. So it was just the recognition from me, like as a user, that this is a product worth writing about. And then obviously just seeing the need for this kind of information, because the things that people were saying about the platform, the analysis around it, I could see that there's just such a big knowledge gap, right, between how people approach this and what they were saying in China, which, I follow all the Chinese media, so I read Chinese, and it's, for me, that's where I get most of my information. And then the international press, who just basically don't know anything about what happened before, like 12 months ago, pretty much. And that's not because they're intelligent people. I'm not discriticizing them. It's just there's nothing to read in English, right? You can't, unless you know people in China, you can't find this information. So, or unless you know how to read Chinese, you can't find it. So, just bridging that gap, I think there was just such an obvious gap to, obvious need for this kind of information.
Absolutely, and I think the product is so addictive. I have that installed on my phone, and every time I open it, I know that basically I don't want to use it too much time, but then I end up watching or spending at least 20 to 25 minutes. And after 25 minutes, I regret that, why did I spend time?
So what just happened?
Yeah, for sure. That's exactly it. And when when people started talking about that in 2018, it was like really, people didn't really know what was going on. It was kind of weird. Now, at least when it came to the rest of the world, at least we kind of had we sort of understood. We had a year basically in China where it was ahead of the rest of the world. And so there was time to digest it in China. Like, what's actually going on here? Why is this so addictive? But having said that, there was a canary in the coal mine rather, which was Toutiao. And that's why we talk about Toutiao and for most of the first third of the book, I would say it's mostly about Toutiao. You really got to understand Toutiao to understand why TikTok is so addictive. But I remember doing our podcast about 3 years ago now. I think it's 2017, and we were covering Toutiao, and we had an analyst from Tencent on there who we were talking to, and back then everyone was saying the strange thing about Toutiao, which is the original flagship product of ByteDance, which is a news aggregator, was that just the time spent on the platform was crazy. And it was just a statistic that was, I think it was like 70, the average user was spending like 70 minutes a day or something like that. But for a news aggregator, that was just crazy. And I was like, what the hell? Like, it's just way off the scale. And people were like, is this real? Like, what is this? And we kind of, we discussed at the time and came to the conclusion that there was a lot of clickbait content, that there was a lot of, just trashy videos and the sort of stuff that what they call in China lowbrow content was the reason why they sort of cracked this way of keep feeding you clickbait content of memes and stuff. And we sort of dismissed the platform as being very trashy and the sort of thing that intelligent people, sophisticated people, educated people would not want to use. And that's really the reputation that the company had up until Douyin. What's fascinating is like the ByteDance before 2017 is completely different from the ByteDance today. Like it's just the company's completely transformed itself. It's unrecognizable. So I think for anyone who's familiar with these products and especially I think that's why the employees like this book so much. The people who work at ByteDance are like, oh wow, like this company even 2 years ago, or when I joined, a year before that, I didn't know all this stuff had happened, and like this is actually where we came from. Because the company won't admit that, right? They're not going to go and say like, yeah, we were trashy memes is what we were doing. They sort of sanitize that history, which is fine. That's what every company does. But the reality is really interesting, and I think it's something that's worth delving into.
You did mention in the book also, right? They were having problem in hiring when they were this trashy and they were having lowbrow.
Yeah. They had at the beginning, they had real problems hiring engineers. They had real problems getting funding for Series B, which is probably the most famous VC story in China, I would say, or one of the most famous, which is how Yuri Milner came to invest in a Russian outsider, and how pretty much every big name in VC in the China space turned them down during seed stage and Series A. And like those investments are, SIG is the company that did that backed them during Series A and the seed round. Those guys, when they do IPO, it's going to be like 10 billion. Like that return on that investment, something like that is up there with like all-time best.
Makes sense. So Matt, as I mentioned, basically when I open the app, I spend a lot of time on that app, right? And one of the breakthrough things about the TikTok is its algorithm. And before TikTok, there were other companies that came with a recommendation algorithm like YouTube. They were famous too, right? But where the YouTube was and where the TikTok is actually a way different, right? Can you explain a little bit more about the algorithm that TikTok is using? I know that you have mentioned a bit about that in your book, but it will be good for the people who are listening and not read a book to a little bit know more about the algorithm.
I mean, you can give a teaser actually so that I can go back on the book and read it.
Yeah, sure. I mean, the algorithm is not one algorithm; it's hundreds, right? And it's constantly changing. One of the reasons why we don't delve into the book in very, very much detail is number one, it's very technical, and anyone non-technical will get very bored. Number two, it's constantly changing, so anything I write will be out of date or risk being out of date. Even we at the beginning we talk a bit about how marketers in China game the algorithm and sort of the systems they use in order to do that. Which again, stuff I put in there is fairly conservative. It's been effective for quite some time, and it's sort of the very basics 101 on like how marketers hack the algorithm, I guess you could say. But there's so much more to it because it is quite, it's a very complex. The thing is, it's not high tech, as in like they have they have some technology that other companies don't have, or they have some data scientist who's really amazing, and they've got some knowledge that Google doesn't know, etc. It's not that at all. It's just that it's a very complex system. It's hundreds of different algorithms optimized for different use cases and different scenarios in order to surface the best content. One of the things, that it's pretty good at bringing you new content. It doesn't like to repeat too much. You'll notice that if you go on TikTok, that it will lock into something that you're watching at the beginning, basically it's like, okay, you like this type of video, you like dogs, okay, great, we're going to show you a bunch of dog videos at the beginning to get you hooked. But once you're regularly logging in and you've got that sort of stable usage pattern, now it's going to quickly start trying to shift out and trying to like expand out from that. So one of the things I think it does best is actually broaching out from that and those initial categories into showing you other categories that are appropriate and testing that efficiently and effectively. So that's, I think, what it's probably its greatest strength is being able to do that, because without that it just becomes really boring. Like even if you love dog videos, it's not going to be be enough. And then the other thing is like the video classification and things like that, I think is a whole area that's very interesting and equally important. And then the content operations is something that, and certainly during the early growth stages, was super important. So I don't want to over-index on the algorithm, because I think people talk about it too much, to be honest. It's important and it's effective, but I don't think it's anything that Google couldn't do. I don't think it's anything that Facebook couldn't do if they really put their mind to it. It's a combination of factors that makes TikTok successful, and the algorithm is very important, but it's just one.
So on the basis of that TikTok success, I have a question about the other apps. Actually, you mentioned in your book also, like example, like Musical.ly it seems like it was sitting on a gold mine for global dominance, for engagement and stuff. Like, what do you think like Musical.ly could have done differently than what they have done, and why?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, that's a really great question, because I totally agree. Musical.ly was sitting, they kind of had, looking back now, I'm sure that Alex Jew and Lewis Young must be kicking themselves, that they actually did have the opportunity to become the next Facebook and didn't realize. To be fair, we can't blame them too much, because nobody realized it. I think everyone was surprised by the effect that the combination of the Musical.ly experience plus the Toutiao algorithms combined led to such a great result, and then amplify that with the ad spend. I think they could have been more bold. To answer your question, what they could have done differently. Musical.ly was relying on word of mouth in terms of for marketing, almost entirely. I think in the later years they did start spending, but certainly during the early and mid years they spent basically zero on I think the founders have said that themselves, that we didn't spend anything on marketing, right? They didn't buy any ads. They had an operations team. I guess you could argue that was marketing. I don't know, but
did ByteDance?
I think going back, they would have taken more VC money and put more behind it in terms of paid growth and acquiring users through the channels that TikTok did aggressively. So that's definitely one thing. Obviously, they regret not coming back into China earlier. That's another thing. It's quite interesting that they originally they decided, well, they did try it in China, right? When they launched Musical.ly early on, they launched in China, they launched in the US and other markets, and China completely failed. And it took off eventually with Spike TV in the US. But the founders have said themselves that they kind of felt that it shouldn't have worked in China because kids had too much homework, they didn't have free time, which is true. And also that Asian people, well, Chinese people rather, are less creative when doing short video was another thing, that they felt culturally Chinese people weren't comfortable enough to do short videos. And that's actually true, because when you think about, it's actually kind of amazing, right? That you think about Musical.ly back 2-3 years ago, it was really just viewed as a platform for kids. And it was only really teens and preteens who were comfortable enough to look at it, to hold up their camera in front of them, hold up their phone and like talk into it and do hand movements and things like that. Yeah. And everyone else was kind of looking at this and laughing at them, going, "Those kids, like, this is a bit silly. Okay, I get it, but like, I'm not doing that. That's weird." And when you look at the very first reviews of TikTok in the Western media, that's exactly what people are saying. They're like, adults who are doing goofy videos or adults who are lip syncing, and I think that's just really weird, and you'll never get me doing that. And it's amazing to see how fast that changed, right? It literally was that's exactly what people were saying in 2018, and it took like maybe 18 months for that to, and there's influencers were all over it, and people were do what was considered weird just 18 months earlier became normal.
But that is kind of true, right, Matt, though? If you look at the millennials, Gen Zs are kind of more comfortable in terms of creating those short videos, like across platforms.
Yeah. Well, the great thing about kids is they don't have any preconceptions, right? They don't have any history. They've got no habits. They look at everything fresh. A really great example is my daughter. She uses voice. I'm very bearish on a voice, like the Amazon
Siri,
Echo,
Alexa,
things like all of these voice in general. I just think it's just a very I try to use it and I can't, and I'm like, I think voice is a big thing because people want it to be a big thing, not because it actually works. Same thing with chatbots. We had this with WeChat like 3-4 years ago, that people started, when Facebook said we're doing chatbots, suddenly chatbots became this huge thing because people wanted it to be a huge thing. But straight away you could see it just didn't work, and nobody on WeChat was using chatbots, and that's because they didn't work. But everyone was still talking about it anyway. But anyway, the thing about voice, why I'm bringing this up, is because my daughter uses it very naturally. She'll just speak to in a way that I won't. She's just very happy to hey, and just speak to it like a person. And so for me, that's a strong indicator that actually voice will be huge one day. Even though today I don't think it's going to be. Today I think it doesn't work, but. I set for some edge use cases. I can't find a useful way to make voice fit into my schedule right now. But I'm confident that one day it will be huge because of how my daughter's using it. I think I see the same thing here with Musical.ly.
Try with weather. Start with weather, I would say. Hey, Alexa, what's the weather outside?
Yeah, I mean, all of this stuff, like ask them the time. Like, it's just easier to look at your wrist than ask the time. That's just a much slower thing. Ask the weather, I can just look out the window. Like, that doesn't save time for me at all. So
I've not weather a lot. Like, I have not opened the weather app for I would say months, because I have Google Home and Alexa at home, and as soon as I get up from my bed, I'm like too lazy. I'm just say, hey, how's the weather looking like today, and I'll have my answer there. And especially like when I have to do my yard work a little bit, then I ask like, how's the weather looking for the week, so I know I'm planning my stuff there. That's where the voice kind of helps me actually. Like, I don't want to pick the phone up or whole stuff or summarize something. It's getting better. And
it's getting better. I mean, I'm not totally writing it off. I'm just saying it's not a game changer today, but I'm confident it will be one day. Just my daughter, the way I just see there's an echo there of how my daughter's using it in a different way to I am.
Absolutely.
And therefore, like, the same thing was happening with short video, that teens and preteens were using this in a very different way to anyone even in their early 20s, and that was actually we should have taken notice of that earlier, as entrepreneurs or as investors or as tech giants, whoever in the sort of stack of the ecosystem where you are, like, when that behavior, when you see young people using the technology differently to people who are older than them, that's a strong indicator that there's something big there, I think.
That's a great piece of advice actually. Like, anyone who's listening to this podcast, they should actually remember this one. Next time you want to get some ideas, you want to invest somewhere, do that, what Matt said.
Yeah.
I mean,
I mean,
just to
it's,
go a little off topic and come back to it, but like Facebook is a very big example of that. Like whenever it tries out some new apps, it actually tests the markets in like Southeast Asian countries, mostly India, and it has been known to use these enterprise level applications by serving it to teens and preteens and paying them like $20 a month, and then seeing how the app reacts. It's more for information collection, but how they generally use different apps to see their habits, and then they make a lot of decisions based on that. It has been in the news for. They have been.
Yeah, it has some project
Yeah,
in that way.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then I
So
think
go
also
ahead. Go ahead.
Matt has mentioned very, very nicely in the book that sometimes you actually have to have a operations team, like in China. Like in general, in US, we do not have the operations
Yeah.
team by the startups. But operations team in China is actually very much in. And then they actually work hard to iterate on the product, as you mentioned in the book, until they nail it. And that's what actually looks like happened with the Doing also, right? Especially with
Yeah.
the influencers, the initial adopters who were young.
Absolutely. So Matt, it would be kind of unfair to talk about ByteDance without actually talking about Tencent. So,
sure.
kind of question about like ByteDance kind of came from behind and took a lot of Tencent's market share. So, what do you think that? Do you think that Tencent is kind of working on some kind of strategies to get back some of its market share? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think we cover in the book the direct conflict with Tencent and ByteDance over short video.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's been any major developments since we finished writing, since what I put in the book. You know, it's stayed quite stable in terms of the dynamics in that market between the two companies. And I think we've seen the same thing play out with we are seeing the same thing play out with Facebook and TikTok, where Facebook will have a very tough time building something that can take over and lead the market. They will have their share of the market. It will be a small share of the market. I'm confident they can build something that can be in the mix, but they're not going to, unless TikTok gets banned outright or there has to be a sale or something, some political or regulatory reason, in terms of competitive dynamics, they won't be able to beat TikTok for the same reasons that Tencent could not beat TikTok, could not beat Douyin rather. But I think what's interesting today in the China market around Tencent and ByteDance is that ByteDance has grown into this new giant, this new B in the BAT, let's say, and we've returned back to there being a three-player dynamic in China. We like three kingdoms, if you know the Chinese history. Before there was just two kingdoms. Well, there used to be three. There was Baidu was in the mix during the desktop era. Even recently, as recent as 2011, ByteDance was actually by market valuation the largest internet company in China, right? So 9 years ago it was number one. Today it's a mid-level player, I would say, and we were for a long period just having these two giants, but now we've got this third. So this third guy's coming up, and they're very ambitious. They're moving both into e-commerce, which is encroaching on Alibaba's territory quite clearly, and at the same time moving into gaming, which is Tencent's territory. So they're basically, you know, not trying. There was a period where we felt that even maybe 18 months ago, where many people were saying that ByteDance was clearly competing with Tencent, but maybe they could be friends with Alibaba. Maybe there wasn't a conflict there. Now that's changed completely. Like they're going for everything. With gaming, I think there's a very interesting dynamic around gaming, because gaming in China is more lucrative than the rest of the world in terms of all internet services. It's a much larger slice of the pie. So that's why, you know, for Tencent, it's made so much sense to focus on gaming in China so much. But Tencent wasn't always good at gaming. In fact, if you go back to the time when they IPO'd around 2004, they were actually just getting into gaming, and they could only really do casual gaming, and they weren't really doing hardcore gaming very well. And they had to learn that over a couple of years, consistently trying to do this, and they failed, and eventually they worked out how to do it. They acquired Riot Games in America, League of Legends and all that, and eventually Honor of Kings, etc. Like they moved fully into doing hardcore gaming. But I think ByteDance is following a similar pattern. I think history is repeating itself. And the reason why Tencent could, back in 2003 or 2002, Tencent was a small player in gaming, and companies like Shandar and companies like NetEase were much, much bigger. But Tencent eventually, step by step, overtook these companies and grew because they had one unfair advantage, and that was traffic. Because of the social networks, the user acquisition cost for them was zero or close to zero a lot of the time, whereas their competitors had to pay to acquire users. Now that's a pretty amazing advantage to have. And ByteDance has the same advantage. Through Douyin today in the China market, they can acquire users for casual games and pay nothing. And they can do it at scale, because there's so much time being spent in Douyin now. And this is exactly what we're going to see them do with TikTok, I believe. This is, if we're looking at where TikTok's going to go and where ByteDance is going to go globally, one of the things I expect them to do is what they've done in China, and what every Chinese company's done in China, is when you have the traffic, you allocate a sizable portion of your ad inventory to drive and acquire users for your own family of products. And so there's so many ByteDance apps in China that for sure they're going to flip out a bunch of them. They've already done it with Lark, right? So Lark is Feishu in China, and there's Lark outside, so they're direct equivalents. But there should be more in the future, I feel. And I don't think they're doing it now because of the political risk. I think they're actually shutting down the smaller apps because they feel it's they're not making meaningful contributions to revenue, but they might cause them a political issue because they're all content platforms. Yeah. So things like Top Buzz and News Republic, which are both content apps, are high risk but low reward for them. So, but I think once things settle down, we'll see them do this. In China, this is exactly what they're trying to do now with games, is that they're acquiring users, but it only works for them with casual games at the moment, which they've been very successful in, which is exactly what Tencent was back in the early days as well. And they're trying to break into hardcore games, but that's a longer play. That's going to take 3 to 5 years, I feel. But when they do that, and I think they will, if they're persistent, they'll be able to snatch, because gaming is a little bit volatile, right? You do get games every so often that come out from small studios that become big hits suddenly. We've seen it with Among Us recently, right? That's more of a casual game, I think. But like PUBG is also from Bluehole, a really good example a few years ago. So, that studio is a very small studio relatively, and Tencent swooped in and got the rights for that for China. But if that history was to repeat itself today, you might well see ByteDance swoop in and pay double, just to get that one hit to kick things off. And then once they've got that one hit and they give it a lot of traffic, and so it definitely is going to succeed no matter what, now they can go to other studios and say, look what we did with this title, and they've become a serious player with gaming. I think that's probably what's going to happen, but we'll have to see.
So it's very interesting. Basically, they're now getting into the rivalry of the ByteDance and then Tencent. And what we see is that the Tencent has, and the WeChat, there is the concept of the mini apps, and the overall adoption of the technology in China is a little different or minor differences from the US. So based on, we're fortunate that you have actually a lot of experience in the China market, right, and studying that. So overall, broadly, what are the different similarities and differences that you see between the US and the China market in terms of the technology adoption?
Yeah, there's the infrastructure is very different. So in the Silicon Valley, the advertisement infrastructure is far more developed than China. So today it's catching up, especially ByteDance is the one company that's catching up fastest, but Tencent's also improved their offering because of ByteDance. But traditionally, if we go back for the last 15 years in China, the advertisements has been way behind Silicon Valley. So if you're a marketer in China, Western marketers come in and they come to our conference, you know, from abroad, and it's like, okay, how do we do marketing in China? And they're like, they can't believe, like, what? Where's the ad targeting? You can't, what? You have to work with influencers, like. So that's why influencer marketing is more developed in China, because the big platforms are all, you know, closed ecosystems, walled gardens. They don't want you to acquire their users, right? They want content. They want you know, they want influencers or KOLs in China and things like that. But they want to keep you in their garden, and they're very, very protective about opening up data, opening up APIs for people to access. All that stuff they're far, far more conservative. Whether in China, they're much more about monetization through e-commerce is far more developed, and gaming, as we mentioned earlier, is much more important and a larger, more lucrative, basically. So in terms of structurally where the money, where these companies make their money, it's very different. Silicon Valley is very ad driven, and China is more e-commerce and gaming driven. But that makes sense, actually, because for Silicon Valley, they are global companies, right? So Google needs to make money in Korea. They need to make money in Egypt. They need to make money in Argentina. So advertisement is the best way to do that, because you're monetizing from the businesses, not the consumers. E-commerce, doing that globally is going to be really tricky. Whereas in China, the Chinese companies are just focusing on one very, very large market. And so for them, payments in e-commerce makes so much more sense, because you only need to go through the regulation once and get it to work. And they've got it to work, and they've got the regulation in place, and there is some conflict there. It's not, as we found out with the Ant IPO recently, it's not as easy as, even if for Chinese companies, they still have to work with the banks and people like UnionPay, and it's tough for them, but they did work it out. They've been successful. So for them, they can get people to make transactions on their platform. That makes a lot of sense. And then the infrastructure in terms of logistics in China in the past 10 years has gone from basically being very bad to being the best in the world by far. So you can ship packages across China super cheap, super fast, very reliable, low shrinkage rates. You can track it on your app, see exactly where it is, all of this stuff. And then, like, people, just no matter where, you can pick up packages. There's always like pickup spots everywhere. And then Chinese all live in flats, in apartments. So it's just very easy for distribution. All of this stuff means that e-commerce can be so much more important in China than you see in other markets. So there's reasons why things are so structurally different in different markets. So for WeChat, it makes total sense to do mini programs and to put a lot of effort into it, because they have the payments, and e-commerce is super developed. So they know that that's going to be an interesting and lucrative thing to do. Whereas Facebook, to do it, okay, they don't have the payments, at least Facebook themselves don't have the payments. They have to work with a partner to do that, and they have to do it differently for every market that they're in. And then the same thing with logistics for e-commerce infrastructure. They're not Amazon, where they have their own fulfillment centers. They're relying on third parties. And in China, you can rely on third parties because there's so many of them and they're so cheap. But in other markets around the world, shipping's far more expensive. It's unreliable. People, aren't very confident doing it. And so that, these are the fundamental reasons why these markets are so different.
But Matt, Facebook and Instagram are actually moving towards that. I mean, the whole thing is based on social commerce right now. They are
totally.
They're banking on that. Do you think that they actually are learning these concepts from the Chinese ecosystem, or this is just
for sure.
the natural move?
No, you're right. I mean, they're moving and they're trying it. Of course, they have to. But I'm just saying, why is there such a big gap, right? It's down to these. It's not because Facebook's, doesn't know what's happening in China or doesn't care or they're too arrogant to do whatever. Like there's some media articles that come out saying, you know, like Facebook doesn't know what they're doing and stuff. It's ridiculous. Like these guys know exactly what they're doing, right?
Exactly.
They're no dummies, and they're doing what's best for them. And up until now, that's been advertisement, and that's been the right thing to do. But yeah, they need to look for other areas of growth, and maybe especially with COVID-19, now is the time to push that. I feel it's got to be. If you can't make e-commerce work in an environment where everyone's in their houses, when are you going to make it work? So for them, this is the right time. They should be doing it, and arguably they should have been doing it earlier. You know, we all know what the problems are with advertisement and the sort of negative effects around that socially, and I think that's so much has been written around that. Yeah. But with e-commerce, yeah, there are some benefits in terms of like you're monetizing directly from the user, so that usually leads to better alignment of the user experience with the platform's incentives, typically. Certainly that's been something that people have picked up with WeChat, is that WeChat is very protective of the user experience. And I think that is true. I think Alan Zhang is quite a special character and builds WeChat for himself as much as anyone else. So they have done a good job there, I think. From a user perspective, I'm very happy that Alan Zhang is the guy running WeChat in China, because if it was an Alibaba-owned app, it would be quite different, or a Baidu app, or like a Facebook app. This would be I look at other messaging apps, you know, recently I've been using Line from Japan, and they actually put advertisements directly in the inbox for the messenger, and I find it just crazy. I can't imagine, like, it's just such a disruptive user experience that you would never see in China.
So Matt, that brings me to the next question of if you had the crystal ball and that you can look 10 years from now, what do you think, like, where the China internet market would be? And would we see more TikTok-like companies, globally dominating companies coming out from China, or this was just one-off?
Yeah, 10 years out is really, you can't say. I mean, like, but I think you could say 3 years out. I mean, 3 to, yeah. Definitely, you know, we can be very positive around China and internet services in general. They've already caught up in many areas with Silicon Valley, and I believe they will, even more areas, they will get further ahead. You don't have to believe that China is more innovative, or they know how to be more creative or anything like that, or that they're more intelligent or harder working. They are harder working. I think that's quite clear, but like, you don't even have to believe that's true. You only have to believe that the average Chinese company or worker in tech can be as productive as the average in America. And then the sheer scale of the market itself means that they will absolutely dominate. So, you know, there's lots of debates over like which one's more creative or innovative. I don't think that. You just need to believe they're roughly the same. And China absolutely will be number one because it's just far larger. But that will take many years to play out. They're still way behind in many areas of like hardcore foundational technology, as Huawei's finding out, you know, that with their microprocessors and microchips, things like that, where China's really neglected that fundamental research, but is catching up, and will, you know, they will find their way to do it. But I think overall, with Chinese companies, we can be pretty optimistic. What's the next wave? Right now, this year, the big thing's been for internet services has been live stream e-commerce. I'm less bullish on that one. I think it's been overhyped. I think we're in a bit of a lull right now, essentially, where we've gone through a period of rapid innovation and change in the Chinese market over the last, since 2013, I would say. Well, arguably, no, you could say the whole of the last decade was just pretty incredible, actually, thinking about it. Honestly, if you go back 10 years and look at China internet 10 years ago, it is unbelievable how much it's changed. So I think we've gone through this decade of huge change. We're right now slowing down, and that's fine. But we really need to wait for some fundamental breakthrough to happen again. The Chinese, when mobile started with the iPhone, they were so behind America, and they caught up eventually by the end of it. But it's a little bit too late, where all of the low-hanging fruit had already gone to American companies. When we start the new platform, something like, whether it's voice or whether it's AR or VR, something like that, then, and Chinese companies start on day one on a level playing field with American companies, or, fairly level playing field, I think you're going to see how much faster they are and how much stronger they are at iterating compared to the American giants. And they're really just going to stream away. I mean, if you go back to, if America and China had been on the same level during 2007, for example, there's no way WhatsApp would be an American company, for example. It would absolutely, the Chinese would have all jumped on that and built all that. So Facebook would have been in China. All of the key apps and e-commerce things and things like that or Uber and all of that lot would have come from China. They were just too far behind at the time, but now they're kind of level. So yeah, we'll have to see for the next big thing. Personally, I'm very excited about AR and VR. I think that's going to be, what Snapchat's doing is really cool. I really like it. I think they're probably one of my favorite, or maybe my favorite American company is Snapchat and what they do around that. I think it's
lately their stock has been tearing up. Actually, the stock is going really good. Snapchat.
Yeah, definitely. And Tencent invested in them at the right time. When they really invested them when Tencent invested in them, everyone was saying why they, that's not a good deal, and they've wasted their money. That was what media was saying. But they were. I remember at the time, Martin Lau was saying, we think this is a very attractive price for this company, and we believe in the founder very strongly. And I think there's echoes. Evan Spiegel and Alan Jung are quite similar in many ways. Yeah, I think I believe that Evan Spiegel still has a lot to come, and I think his best years are ahead of him in terms of innovation and bringing new things.
Absolutely, yeah.
Personally, I like Snapchat, especially what I have seen. I mean, I might be wrong on certain things there.
No, the face filters.
I mean, they have always been innovative. They have always come out with something new, rather than like the rest of the companies I've seen. They have been catching up or copying other ecosystems. But Snapchat always trying to be the ahead of the curve, and they are doing something which no one has kind of done before.
And I think TikTok takes basically things, they Snapchat as a friend, not enemy, because I think what they are getting into is actually a little different from what TikTok want to do, which is more of entertainment, right? And I think
that's what Evan said when he gave the pyramid conception of them being about communication, which is a fundamental. I need to speak to my friends and connect, which is very different from being entertained, which is what TikTok is about. TikTok will probably say we're not just entertainment, we're also education, right? Is the big thing for them.
Now they could,
EduTalk it's been a big drive for them. But those are very different needs. It's undeniable. Having said that, you could also argue that they do compete still, I guess. But I tend to go along with Evan. I think it's right. Like the reason you open these apps is you need to understand the psychology of why somebody opens your app. Why do they tap that button? What is the driving them? What are they looking for? If you really understand that, I think that's why I think Evan does. That's why he's saying, we don't compete. These are very different reasons. We fulfill very different human needs.
So, Matt, a question, since we are on TikTok, but I wanted to get your views on what do you think about the controversy surrounding TikTok in the global markets, not China, of course, but is spying a real concern, or it's more political?
I mean, it's definitely a political a risk, shall we say.
Yeah.
It's quite amazing to see how, some people say stubborn, but I would say how bold Zhang Yimin's been, and how persistent he's been in his vision of the company being global, and taking a calculated risk to not sell and to persist with this deal that they seems to be happening in America. Although, to be honest, I have no faith that it won't just completely change again at some point. But it seems they are shooting for a deal that does involve Oracle and Walmart as of the time that we are speaking, and with that deal involving ByteDance retaining a majority ownership of the TikTok entity in North America. So that's a pretty, actually a pretty good deal for them, I think, and one where he can still maintain his vision of building a global company, maybe one that needs to be two, but one where they still own most of what that company is. But in markets like India or markets like Pakistan or Indonesia, where they've also been banned, I think these are very clearly just much more just political risks that are quite volatile. I expect them to be more of them, and this is the risk of being a content platform. They've also faced risk in their local market, right, where they had Nehan Danza was banned. They had in 2018 the government clamped down on them. I don't see that risk going away. I think that's going to be actually more and more, because the internet will splinter up. Regulation will become more and more across markets, and I think we're going to see more and more that the experience of using the internet, maybe right now we're in a golden era. We might look back on this in 5 to 10 years and be like, wow, everything was so open and we all used the same tools and platforms, because I could easily see a future where the internet becomes very balkanized around countries. Once countries realize that they can control the internet, once India bans TikTok, then Pakistan can also say, oh, we can ban it, great. And then the next country will go, well, we can do that too. And so once these examples have been set, we're going to see that countries use them more and more. And so, I don't think it's a good trend. I think it's great that the internet is open. It's a unifying force for humanity. I think it's really helped accelerate bringing us all together to have these platforms. But it is also undeniable at the same time that it's mostly benefited American companies. Those are the big companies that have really benefited most from global internet in terms of business. And it does have negative effects in terms, when it comes to content, it has negative effects, which sometimes the platforms don't control as well as they could. And in those cases, it's quite reasonable that countries would want to regulate. But I don't have any answers for what ByteDance should do. I don't, it's not easy. There's no, I think they're actually handling it quite well, to be honest.
Yeah. So, I mean, that brings you a good, into we know what happened with TikTok in US, and especially when it got banned in India. I think it probably influenced Trump to actually take some actions on TikTok in US. So let's skip forward to the Biden winning the election, president-elect. How do you think that's going to impact the future of ByteDance? Would there be? What's your take on it, actually?
I think it's overall probably a good thing, because he's less volatile than Trump, and Trump was clearly using TikTok as a whipping boy for his own gains, and that I don't see Biden doing that as much. But having said that, it's quite clearly that whether it's Democrat or Republic in America, both of them are very anti-China these days. And I don't expect there to be a change of heart from Washington, D.C. regarding Chinese internet companies, regardless of who's in the White House. And so I don't see it changing that much. It's a small plus.
So what was the reaction in China actually? Like, were people were loving when Biden won the election, or any insight from that?
Yeah, do you know what? A lot of Chinese actually do like Trump. They kind of respect his brashness and arrogance, and they kind of like a success story around someone who's rich and
Not
flaunts that. They kind of like the strong man. He's kind of a strong man in some respects. And certainly, having said that, I don't think many Chinese have a nuanced understanding of American politics, and they're sort of looking at this from afar, and they just see that, you know, this guy has a personality and does interesting things, and they like that. I think is more more than anything, rather than thinking
it's
about
not just China.
Yeah, right. I mean, he is news. People love talking. One thing he's really good at is getting people to talk about him and to think about him a lot and mention him and keep him top of mind. And so, you know, if you don't have any investment in what happens, you know, at least it makes it more interesting and fun, I guess. You could argue that. But obviously many Americans would disagree. And I think overall, probably the government probably also feels that Biden's more predictable, let's say, or less volatile, and so it could also be a good, could be a good thing for stabilizing the relationship there.
Absolutely. I think that brings you one of the last topics on this particular podcast. I think we are fortunate that we have also the two co-hosts, Preet and Shashank, who are the founders of the Flix, and I don't know, which is basically the streaming recommendation app. And Matt, I don't know whether you got a chance to look into the website or the app or not, but I wanted to basically take your suggestion that you have for the Preet and Shashank about the OTT and streaming market and the future of that, and then what suggestion you have about the Flix app itself.
Just to add on that is like Flix is trying to do like we are not just a streaming recommendation app. We are also trying to become like a social network. So like just like every TikTok or there is like, and we want to merge the two, because OTT, the streaming content is all digital, and social network has been kind of like, we see that as a very good
huge gap
intersection where we can actually make a really big, huge impact in the world.
Because logically, if you think about it, you ask your friends and families for movie recommendations, shows recommendations. Hey guys, tell me something interesting to watch. So it seems like just a natural fit for a social recommendation app that is powered by social recommendations, essentially.
Well, what we learned from, if I got the book's content top of mind, so one of the lessons from the book is that we've kind of conflated, I feel, social networks, the social graph and the interest graph, and people feel that the social graph is the thing that's important. I feel the interest graph is actually more valuable and easier to monetize and can be just as powerful as the social graph when you're doing a content-based application. That's one of the lessons from ByteDance, is that's why people were less optimistic about them in the early days, is because they didn't have social element. They were all about just building an interest graph, tagging users based on interest with no social interactions beyond commenting and likes. So that's, having said that, you know, social applications like Facebook and Twitter obviously use that technology as well to curate the feeds that they provide people quite heavily, much more than people realize. And so it's not just black and white in terms of those two opposites. But I think one of the critical things that TikTok has allowed us to see is that you need this sort of feedback loop, right? Like you need to be able to. What makes TikTok so powerful, one of the things, is that there's this very fast feedback loop in terms of, compared to, say, Netflix or in China, Tencent Video, where you can watch a video for 45 minutes and not touch the screen once. They're not getting any kind of data around you, from you until you finish watching the episode and then have to do something. Whereas TikTok, every minute, even when you don't do something, that's a strong indicator for them that you actually enjoy the content. So even by not doing something, you're still training the algorithm, and you're tapping the screen, multiple times a minute. And all of these are meaningful interactions. So it's getting a really fast feedback loop. I see you guys, I did check out the video for the app briefly before. Like you've got like a Tinder mode, I think, in there, right? For like flicking through different suggestions of TV series. And so that's the kind of like fast interaction. Like Tinder's actually another good example of that, where you have to make a choice. You can't just do nothing. And those choices are quite fast. And so there's lots and lots of feedback coming in, which is helping tag that user and enrich that user profile. And then you can create something really powerful. So to me, that Tinder mode looked quite good, actually. I thought, oh, this is something that could be interesting. Yeah. Because that's, for me, I've been thinking about how to do this type of thing for audio. There's many people trying to solve this problem for short audio clip, and how to create TikTok for podcasts, essentially. But it's very difficult because there's no feedback loop. Audio is too passive.
No, we've been talking about that too.
It's too passive. If you can crack the feedback loop, if there's a way for the user to indicate their preferences, every minute by saying a keyword or tapping something. I don't know. I can't work it out, but without that one element, it doesn't work. Cool. And here you've got the same problem because the content on Netflix is quite long. You're talking long form content, right? So how do you get that fast feedback loop?
Awesome. Okay. So this is a very interesting conversation we had all together. So I would say this brings us to the end of this podcast. We have been going more than an hour now. We would definitely like to thank Mathhew Brennan for his amazing insights, especially about China technology and his global impact. And I'm sure our listeners are going to enjoy listening to this podcast as much as we enjoyed talking to you.
Yeah, and don't
absolutely
forget to actually buy The Attention Factory on Amazon. I think it's an amazing book. Everyone should buy it.
Yeah, you can get it on Amazon, paperback and Kindle, and we're doing the Audible version soon. So I'll be in the studio for a couple of days doing that. Awesome. But that probably won't be out till Christmas, around that, I would say. Maybe early, I don't know. We'll have to see. And we're starting to get a process to get it translated into some other languages, but that will be next year as well. So for now, it's just on Amazon. That's the place to get it. And check it out. Hope you enjoy.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much, Matt, for coming. And guys, if you like this chat, please subscribe to our channels, techLGTM.com. And also we are available on all major podcasts and also on YouTube. And if you have any questions that you want to ask, we'll be happy to relay it to Matt, or Matt, if you want to drop in your email address, if somebody wants to throw in a question, if you are willing to, if that's not invading your...
that's fine. And you can catch me on Twitter or LinkedIn. Those are the platforms where I post content, basically.
We'll tag your Twitter.
And we will definitely add your social media links to our episode so that people can check you out.
And
good stuff.
I think you also have a podcast, right? So I just subscribed yesterday, so I'm going to catch up on that. Like pretty interesting topics you have on your podcast. So people, if you're interested, want to subscribe to more podcasts, I'm definitely will recommend Mathew's podcast.
Yeah, sounds very, very interesting. I was also looking into your podcast. Yeah,
I think it's called China Tech Talk.
Yeah, we haven't done one for a while because my co-host went to a different media, but there's a whole backlog on there as well. Like some of the stuff I've covered, we did many episodes back in the day around ByteDance related topics. Mm-hmm. So you can actually go and listen to what we were talking about 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and all of that stuff, and see it really was, it's quite amazing, that journey, I think. It's
That's awesome.
To hear. And we covered lots about WeChat as well on there, and Tencent.